Wow, wow, wow. Right. Okay. It's go time. Thank you so much, everyone, for dialing in at 5:30 on a Thursday, as already gets dark. Um, we have such a treat for all of you joining this webinar. We've got a range of different disciplines across publishing at Hachette, different levels, different departments. So we're going to meet the panel in just a second. But as a reminder for anyone who's signed up to this webinar and needs a bit of a refresher of what we'll be covering today, the purpose of this session here is peeling back a bit of a veil on a publishing house, understanding how it works, how the different departments interplay, but primarily focusing on how people got their first break within the industry, and also passing on some of that sage advice and wisdom to you all. We're going to be covering everything from CVs and cover letters to networking and advice in preparation for interviews. So hopefully everyone will leave this webinar a little bit wiser and more informed than when they joined. I am Ella Darlington from Creative Access. I'm the head of comms and marketing there. And just in case anyone dialing into this webinar isn't quite sure who Creative Access are, we are a social enterprise that's all about making the creative industries more representative of what the UK looks like today. So that means working with talented individuals such as yourselves and hopefuls, as well as employers such as Hachette, who we've got the pleasure of having lots of panelists from today, including some of our alumni. We share everything from career inspiration to job and career opportunities, training at all points of your career. And one recommendation that I would make is that you follow us on social media and also register with us, which you can find that registration link on our website. That makes sure that every single week you receive highlights of all of the amazing offers and opportunities that we've got at that current moment. Right. That's enough from me. Why don't we meet some of our panelists who we have joining us today? So I'm going to wheel through who we have, and then why don't you all in turn give me a little sense of what it is that you do in day to day. So we have James Whelan, who is Sales Operations Executive at Hachette. We've got Saida Graham, who's Contracts and Rights Manager at Book Couture. We've got Maria Garbett-Lucero, Publicity Director at Scepter. We've got Alana Gaglio, Audio Editorial Assistant at Hachette. And we have Leodora Darlington, not a cousin of mine, Publishing Director at Orion Books. So why don't we reel off in that order? And I'd love for you all to just give all of our webinar attendees a little sense of what it is that you do each day. So James, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so hello everyone. My name is James. Use he, him pronouns, and as Ella was saying, sales operations executive. At the moment, that job essentially means I'm in charge of two things. I organize a lot of event orders for customers, if it's whether it's an indie bookshop or just a venue who are looking to do a book launch or a book event with an author. They'll be coming to me to orders, as well as looking after signed copies of books. So when authors get their book signed, they send them all to the warehouse, and I'm the one in charge of making sure that everybody gets their fair share of copies, especially with the indie bookshops.
Fabulous. And so if you're not doing what you're doing, then things start to fall apart, right?
I mean, they'll probably fall apart anyway, but I'm there to fix it afterwards. But yeah.
Saida, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Saida, pronouns she, her. So I'm a contracts and rights manager at Book Couture. So primarily I work in the rights team. I do a little bit of contracts side for the head contract, so like the actual contract between the publisher and the author, but mostly I work in the rights team, which means that I'm part of the team that sells translation rights. So I have a selection of territories that I sell into, and then every year we go to Frankfurt Book Fair to kind of meet editors from foreign publishers, and then advertise our books basically and sell them so that they can get translated.
Awesome. And also, I think lots of people will be interested to have lots more questions about how that happens and how you make it all work. Maria, you're from a slightly different part of publishing. Why don't you tell us a bit about what your day-to-day looks like?
Well, so I'm at Sceptre, which is the literary imprint at Hachette, and on the publicity side, we work very closely with the authors, pretty second to the editors. We have like very close working relationship that we build up with the authors, because we're basically like their champions to the media. We do everything in terms of like getting the broadcast, like radio interviews, books reviewed in the press, in the newspapers or magazines. We talk to literary festivals as well, and like confirm events with bookshops. So it's basically all of the promotion that you don't pay for, which that would be more the marketing side of things. So publicity, our job is to persuade people in the media to cover a book and get them very excited about it, in order that the public hear about it and then want to buy it.
Brilliant. I'm so glad that we've got different parts of the puzzle, because it's almost like you get to understand the journey of a book with each of you and each of your perspectives. Alana, tell us a bit about what you do.
Hi, I'm Alana. My pronouns are she, her. And yeah, I'm the audio editorial assistant at Hachette on the new across group audio team, which is still quite a baby. But essentially, we turn the print book into an audio version. So we work quite closely with the editorial team and the marketing teams, but we're also kind of our own little ecosystem. So it's quite a varied role. It's like a mixture of editorial, production, and operations. So I kind of assist the team with taking care of our production schedules. I work with our external studios and the narrators that we're working with. We also work with the marketing team to create different kinds of assets and stuff. And as I'm starting to now take on some of my own titles, that's basically working with the studio, to find the narrators and making sure that our authors and editors are happy, and basically just making it happen.
Brilliant. And yeah, audio is definitely an interesting and fast emerging part of publishing. So I think people will definitely have questions around that. And Leodora, please tell us about what you do.
Hello, I'm Leodora. As you say, not related to you, although you might be the first Darlington I've met who is she, her, and yes, I'm publishing director, which is an editorial role. So it's similar to a role of an editor, just a little bit more oversight in terms of strategy. So what that means is a lot of my job is nurturing relationships with agents. And because we're a trad publisher or trad imprint, we don't accept unsolicited manuscripts. So we rely on agents to find our new exciting voices. So be reading lots of submissions, sort of deciding what I want to take forward, discussing that with the team, trying to get everyone to like it as well. And then seeing it through various editorial stages, thinking about the package, talking with the marketing publicity teams about what that strategy is going to be like, and seeing that through to post publication. So it's interesting because that's an editor, and I don't want to get into it too much now, but a lot of your job is not actually editing, but it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And I just wanted to remind everyone that if you wanted to activate captions, if you haven't done so already, you can hit the 3 dots where it says more and activate captions if that is something that you would like to access. And we will have a short portion at the end of this call, about 15 minutes, where we can put some of your live questions to the panel. So please do get thinking about questions that you'd like to put to the panel, and you can submit those as we go along. If anyone likes the look of a question and they want to upvote that question because they want that definitely put to the panel, you can do that with a little thumbs up icon, which is just an upvote. Brilliant. Okay, let's get going. So firstly, I want to take it back to how you all entered into the publishing industry, because I know for a fact that you all have different stories. Some of you may have had internship, some of you may have come from retail, and I'm so super curious to hear more about that. So I'm actually going to start with Maria and Leodora, because I don't know your entries into the industry, and you're both more on the editorial side. I think people will be really curious to understand what your roots were in. So Maria, do you want to kick us off?
Great. Yeah, well, when I was at university, I worked on the student newspaper. So I was getting experience in that, and I thought I was quite interested in journalism at one point. But then I did an MA, and just sort of having written my dissertation and the footnotes and that, and kept mentioning publishers, and I was like, oh, actually, it'd be quite interesting to know what it's like to work on the other side of the lifespan of a book. So I applied for some internships at that time. It was Penguin and Atlantic, and so I did some work experience placements that summer, which led to more work experience placements. And I was like in the right place at the right time. A job came up at Penguin, and someone I had worked with recommended me for an interview. So it was yeah, a nice experience. Yeah.
Awesome. And Leodora, was your journey similar? Was it different?
It was still a bit different. So I was actually working in education before I was working in publishing, and I was doing a master's. So I also did a master's at the same time as working in that school. And as part of the course, which was a writing course, we had a writing in the future, basically how do you use this degree in a job module. And as part of that, I read Spread the Word Writing the Future report, which was looking at sort of the woeful state of representation in commercial fiction in particular. So I was like, this sounds cool. But it's worth being totally transparent. In the school I was working in, there was a woman who knew someone who worked at an agency. So I got a bit of work experience at that agency for a summer. And then from that, met a bunch of people who were really generous with their time and setting up meetings. And one of those turned into a job interview, and then one of those turned into a job. But at the same time, I was also applying for Hachette's, I'm going to forget the name of the scheme, which is really bad on this call, but they've got a scheme for underrepresented people who want to get into publishing, which is like a work experience training scheme, and HarperCollins has a similar one. So I'd also applied for those two and had gotten a place on the Hachette one, and was going through the stages of the HarperCollins one when I decided to take the job. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
That's super interesting. And I'm definitely going to get onto Saida, Alana, James in a second, because you all have really interesting routes into the industry. But I just wanted to pick up on the point around education and qualifications and things like that. We've got a lot of people who submitted questions beforehand that were asking what the requirements are to enter the industry. And I was interested to know your opinions about, from your perspective, and also people that you've worked with within publishing. Do you feel as though there are certain requirements before you apply? Do you think like a publishing MA is essential, or do you think it's useful? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good question. I definitely don't think a publishing MA is essential at all. There are a lot of people in publishing. Well, there's a portion of people in publishing who have done a master's in that space. There are a lot of people in the publishing who've done English literature degrees too. But there are also a lot of people who've taken completely different routes and disciplines. I think really probably the biggest barrier is how you make yourself stand out when it comes to your query letter, really. Because there are so many people applying for jobs, and there are going to be lots of people, yes, that have publishing MAs, but that's not really the distinguishing factor. It's like, can you demonstrate how much you love the work that this imprint produces? Can you demonstrate that you've really read their stuff? I think that's usually the piece that ends up being quite persuasive rather than the qualifications themselves, because really all you need to do is really love books and be willing to work hard, I'd say. Feel free to disagree with me.
No, I think that's a great point. Oh, Maria, did you have anything to say on the same topic?
I was just going to agree. I think there's a lot of experience that you can gain on the job, like through the trainee schemes and work experience placements and whatnot, like hands-on practical experience, being in an office environment, building working relationships with your colleagues, that kind of thing, showing that you have initiative, just like demonstrating, your passion for books. And that can come from various walks of life. Like, I remember when I had my first job interview at Penguin Press, and actually this speaks to your point, Leodora, about standing out. That summer, I was like finishing my dissertation. I had several like odd jobs that I was doing, like babysitting, gardening for my neighbor, working in like retail. And then I mentioned, because they were asking me like, how do you handle like being in a high pressure environment, or we're very busy all the time, like how would that work for you? And I was like, yeah, well, I'm doing all of these jobs whilst I'm interning, and I did some life modeling as well a couple of times to make some money. And actually, that was the thing that the interviewer was like, "Oh, tell me more about that." Which, it's quite a strange thing to mention. But I was like, "Oh," and I was put on the spot. But I was like, "Actually, I realized I'm not that scared of much. Like I could literally stand naked in a room full of strangers." And so that was like a good learning experience for me. And I think in a way, I had other things to say and experience and whatnot, but like that probably stuck out because they're busy in the office doing so many emails and then doing all of these interviews on top of your day job. It's like really knackering. And I think so anything you can do to stand out is probably useful within reason.
Yeah, we won't add that into the show notes to recommend that everyone become a life model, but that is 100% one of the most interesting things that I've ever heard anyone mention in an interview. I love that.
It's just how you frame it. It's like a publicity thing. Spinning
Exactly.
it, making it relevant. It's all transferable skills.
I love it. Alana, I think a lot of people will love your background story, that you literally graduated last year. You entered into a traineeship and now you've been made permanent. Like it's like the dream scenario. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about like your route in and things that helped you along the way to get noticed?
Yeah, so I did an English Lit degree, just a bachelor's. I didn't want to do a master's. And I didn't really have much experience. I did, right after I graduated, I got onto the Penguin Work Experience Scheme, the like 2-week one. So I had 2 weeks of publicity experience there. But I was still quite unsure about kind of my path. So when it kind of got time when I needed to start applying for jobs, I was prioritizing publishing, but I was kind of like, I had been in that publishing hopefuls Facebook group chat and I'd seen how difficult it was. So I was like, I'm gonna, go for other things as well, just to have a backup. So I was applying for all kinds of things, and then this traineeship popped up, and it was actually the first application that I did where I was, oh, I actually really, really want this. And I really care about this compared to like the random other jobs that I was applying for. But I remember thinking like, there's absolutely no way I'm going to get this because like how many thousands of people are going to apply for this? And there were different streams that you could apply for. So there was like an editorial stream, there was a marketing stream. And I think I applied for the editorial one and the audio and publicity one, and ended up getting the audio and publicity one. I actually remember on my interview day, me and James were in the same like team for our like task. So it's quite funny that we've ended up here. So no, yeah, I got onto the audio and publicity placement, and I knew nothing about audio before starting the role. Like I liked audiobooks, but I didn't know anything about how it worked or how it worked like within the greater publishing ecosystem. I only had that tiny bit of publicity experience. And no, yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Was on a really great team. And then about like halfway through the traineeship, a job opportunity came up. It was a whole thing. I was actually working with like publicity and actually Maria at the time, which is another funny connection. But no, yeah, then an opportunity came up to be an assistant, and then it's been quite an evolving role actually, because 2 days after I became assistant, we became a like group wide team as well, whereas previously I worked for like a small area of the company and now we're group. So it's been a very busy year of a lot of changes, but I've ended up somewhere that I would have never have thought I'd be in like a year and a half ago. Like I didn't even know this was a job that existed. So no, yeah, just I don't want to say got lucky because getting onto the traineeship was really, really hard. But yeah, just a lot of like finding what was right for me and finding the right people.
And also, people might not know much about audio as a segment. What's great about working in that space? What did you really love about it?
I think like it's a really varied area. So for me, like when I was trying to find what area of publishing that I wanted to work in, I was always kind of torn between a few because I was like, I can see like how I could fit into different areas and like what I would enjoy in different areas. And then in audio, it's like you get to do a little bit of the editorial stuff, a little bit of production, a little bit of like the marketing stuff. You get to work with the author and the agent. So it's super varied. And also the type of things that we work across is also really varied, because we aren't just doing like fiction or just non-fiction, we do everything. But you also have the option to kind of specialize in different areas as well. So if you say like, oh, I'm really passionate about like sci-fi, then you can do more of those productions. And I think it's a really interesting area because we do work alongside the rest of the publishing ecosystem. So we like work with the editorial team, we work with the marketing team, and we're all part of that, and we're quite like plugged into that. But we're also kind of our own like independent publishing universe in that way, and we kind of see a project from beginning to end in the same way you do with print, but it's a whole different thing. So yeah, we have a lot of like independence in that way, and we get to work with like different people. It's super varied. You get to work with actors, authors. You get to go to the studio and see them actually like do the recordings. It's just super varied. And yeah, doing lots of different things.
Oh, you're making me want to work in audio now. Goodness. I also would like to put some questions to Saida and James, in addition to your roots in, because you both have completely different journeys prior to your imprints. But I would like you to sort of also have a little nod to thinking about the CVs that you crafted and the interviews that you did. So if you can sort of like pepper a bit of advice, think back to those scenarios and just give us a little bit of advice, you know, your journey in and what really helped you in those situations to stand out. Saida, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I would call my like journey to here like a stumble, almost. So I did a BA in creative writing and English lit and creative writing. And kind of at that time, I was like, oh, maybe publishing will work. I don't really know. I don't want to do anything kind of boring or something I won't be interested in. So after I graduated, I was like, I'll get a year of experience and save up money and just do an MA, because I was like, I don't know. Let me just do that. And during that, like, even at university, I was like, okay, what are the things I can do to kind of like get jobs, I guess, if that makes sense, because I was always quite annoyed that I'd never managed to get a job at 16. You know, that's like really silly, but like everyone else could get a job at 16, 17 and I couldn't. And then I got a job at 18 and I went to uni, and I was like, okay, I need to make sure my CV is amazing for like 4 years from now or whatever. So I do like CV workshops with the careers team at my university, and I ended up becoming like a careers link at that's what it was called at my university, which was like kind of someone who helps other students who like in first year or second year kind of get, I guess, more like retail jobs or like kind of jobs that you can just do at uni. And I do like loads of workshops. I go to like talks and stuff to see if it would help at all. And then when I graduated, I worked a year in my university's PR team. So then I was like just saving up, and then I went to do this MA. And over the MA, I kind of did the MA because I wanted to get more work experience, specifically publishing experience, because I just thought maybe they'll have more connections and help. I wouldn't say I was one of the lucky ones. I don't know if you can call it luck or not, but I pretty much had like abysmal work experience by the end of it. I had the best work experience I had was at an academic publisher, but other ones it was just sort of like weird, like one-man band publishers who were just like odd. Like and then yeah, so I had a bit of experience, but like not that much. So it was kind of like I was putting a lot of, I guess, onus on my experience at the university and kind of like the things that I was learning in those classes. And then it did take a while for me to get I get interviews when I would apply for jobs, but it took a while for me to get kind of a good foot in, I would say. So I didn't, and my CV was extensive because I just worked so much during university. So I wouldn't say that kind of helped that much. I don't know. But I did really like try and cater my CV and my cover letter to every job. And I think that's what the careers team at my uni had said previously, just kind of like, I think it's easy to, when you have like 10 jobs to apply for, to just to send out the same thing. But I think it is quite important to make sure you're relating to the job you're applying, specifically the actual role. So whether it's like in audio or editorial, whatever, and to the publisher themselves. So I found that quite important. It is quite time consuming, but yeah, just kind of keeping the information relevant to whatever you're applying for. And then eventually I went through Creative Access, and I got a traineeship. So it was a traineeship at Bonnier Books, which was it was also, I would also say that was a stumble, because no one offered me the job. I just got an email saying, "This is your start date," and I was like, well, I guess I got it. And then after a year, one of the people who was managing me, because I ended up being kind of an office admin / rights assistant / design assistant, they were just like, "Do you like rights?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then they were like, "Here's the contract." And I was like, "Okay, we're here now." But and so I think I'm someone who's really quite like pernickety, I guess, about what's in my cover letter and what's in my CV. And I kind of I would look over it constantly and try and like cut it down and make it like the wording basically efficient wording. And I think that's kind of like the best thing you can do. And in interviews, it's just, I guess you just have to practice. It got at that point, I'd done so many interviews that, you kind of just get into the role of it. But I mean, if anyone's still in university or has like, because I think some universities do, like, you can contact your careers team like a year or 2 years after graduation, just like go to them, ask for CV help or ask for interview help, and they'll give it. They like really have nothing to do other than that at uni in those teams at uni. And I know, because I worked there. But so that would be what I would suggest if you really, really are struggling.
I think that's perfect advice. And I love that idea that you see your CV as this like ever evolving thing, and you become almost like obsessive over it. Like, how much more concise can I make this? How tailored to the job that I'm applying for can I make this? And also, I think a lot of folks can tend to rage apply or spray and pray or whatever the cliche is now, and try and put their CV out into so many places that it almost reduces down your chance of really resonating with someone. At the end of the day, people are going to buy from people, so try and tailor it and make it really purposeful to a few. Stalk the heck out of who you're sending your CV to. There'll be loads of stuff online. That publishers and publishing community are all over Twitter still. Long may it continue. So definitely use that platform, and also use LinkedIn to your advantage. James, I'm conscious that you haven't spoken for a while, and you have so many interesting things to share about your experience. You went through a similar journey to Alana, but your background before you arrived at Hachette was totally different. Like, tell us a little bit about that, and also any advice again that you would give about standing out. And also, if there's anyone listening to this webinar who's just thinking, I just don't have any publishing experience, like I haven't had work experience yet, like what can I do to stand out or highlight what skills I have?
So after I finished uni a couple of years ago now, I thought I did an English creative writing degree, and I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But luckily, I was able to get a job at Waterstones, and I was a bookseller for about 4 years. And the longer I was there, the more I thought, okay, publishing is like a natural next step for me once I've exhausted kind of everything I wanted to do here. So I did lots of things like helping out with events. I was a manager for a little bit of a bookshop. I did what's called ACSing, which is commercial support, which is where you order stock for shops in your area. And I was just trying everything that they kind of offered me, giving it a go, putting my all into it, and was essentially creating all of these opportunities for experience. And while I was doing all that, I ended up started applying for jobs in publishing, and as well as going to all these book events as well, because I think like a lot of other people here, you're thinking, I might have all these transferable skills, but I don't know what I'm transferring it into. So I would go to, like, for example, book signings. I remember one I went to, it was like a surprise book signing with Patrick Rothfuss at Forbidden Planet. And I was like, well, I've got that day off. I'll go down there. And while everyone was very excited to meet Patrick, I saw the publicist there and I was like, I recognize her from Twitter. And so, like, while I was waiting in queue, I struck up a conversation with her, asked her about her job, got put on a bloggers list. And it was just one of those opportunities which I went out and found it. And yeah, after months and months of applying for job interviews, sometimes I would get some, sometimes I wouldn't, and it would be tweaking that CV. And yeah, just like Maria was saying, making yourself stand out, having those kind of tidbits which people will remember afterwards. And yeah, going back to those opportunities, when I would look at my CV, I would go into like sort of analysis paralysis, where it's just like, I don't know what to do now because I've tweaked it to death, and you just kind of get so used to seeing it, you don't know what to do next. And I'll just kind of simplify it, draw it back, instead of having an opportunity, like an experience to talk about for every point that they could bring up. I would think, okay, I did this one festival. How many things can I pull out of that one event, so that whatever question they throw at me, I could just use this one thing, rather than going through years and years and years of, oh, I've done this, I've done that, I did this, I've done that, and then not knowing where to go from there. And it's really helped kind of just simplify things, let me kind of relax in those moments. So I remember during the creative access interview stages, when I had like my one-on-one interview with somebody, we were talking about a Netflix show that come up because I'd just come back from a music festival, and it was just kind of striking that kind of relaxed atmosphere, so that it's a bit less formal, everyone's a bit more relaxed, and then the flow is a lot easier. Then you're not just kind of rigid and thinking, oh, what's the right thing to say.
Yeah, I absolutely love that anecdote where you audaciously went up to that publicist. I think that's a brilliant thing. And even just going to events or being in spaces where you know some of the publishing community are going to be, or being in those online spaces. Did you do any, or would you recommend that people do any kind of digital networking, asking questions, any of that stuff? And how would you recommend people go about that, especially if they're in different regions around the UK, and maybe like a publishing hub like London or Yorkshire or Sheffield aren't as accessible to people? What would you recommend? Any kind of virtual stuff?
I mean, yeah, if you're definitely getting in if you're online a lot now, because it's kind of needed. If you're, for example, this job now, a lot of people are working from home. With Hachette, we have lots of regional offices, so it's not as London centric as it used to be. But yeah, when I was on a blogging list, I'd be put on book tours, and I got to talk to other book reviewers as well as with publicity, and so it's kind of within that kind of loop there. It obviously, you're not in the industry just yet, but it's kind of a good step in the right direction. And yeah, you're just reaching out. People like talk, especially at events like this, where you can sometimes do like a feedback on CVs, and with just LinkedIn as well. Just having those connections, sometimes it is very handy, just knowing who the right people are, and you then kind of get an idea of what the structure is like. So there are so many roles where you just don't even know they exist. Like when I was looking into getting sales, so I did the writes and sales traineeship, and I was like, okay, so you got key account managers, executives, just selling into supermarkets, bookshops. And when I thought about operations, I was like, oh, what goes on? What operations? I love a spreadsheet. What you got for me? And yeah, it's just realizing that there's so many opportunities in there, and it's just keying your experience into it, because you've most likely already have it. It's just actually laying it out there.
And just trying to winkle out a few more of any recommendations that anyone on the panel has about online resources. Like I'll plug one from Creative Access's side, or a couple. In the past, we've done lots of other webinars like this one. So do have a look back on our YouTube channel, watch those, have a look at the names of the panelists, and if you feel that you want to, you can approach those people with genuine questions or career advice. You'd be surprised with how forthcoming people are to offer help or a hand. We also, to Saida's point about CV workshops, as Creative Access, we offer CV consultation workshop. So I think we've got one coming up at the end of this month on the 30th. So you'd access that in the same way that you would to apply for a job. You just head to our opportunities page on our website and just sign up for that. It's totally free and it's virtual. So a little plug there. And I think, Alana, you mentioned publishing hopefuls and things like that. Are there any other like online places that people tend to spend a lot of time from the panel, whether it's even different social media platforms?
I think yeah, that Facebook page is a good place, especially because some people who are already in publishing will like put opportunities in there and offer advice and stuff. I know for myself, I also, as well as following pages like Creative Access, there are loads of like creative industry accounts that you can follow on like Twitter and Instagram that like always spotlight opportunities. I also kept quite up to date with SYP, Society of Young Publishers. They have a branch in the north as well, which is really great. And they do events both in person and online where you can connect with people in the industry. That's actually how I learned about the industry in the first place, by like going to one of those events and like actually meeting people who were there. I did things like a lot of people made like videos on like YouTube of their experiences of getting into the industry and some advice that they, I remember watching like loads of them. So it is out there, like people are really willing to share everything.
Brilliant. And I'm also going to ask some questions about career switching. I've seen come through on the chat, Leodora, we actually had two separate people both saying, I'm a teacher, I'm really thinking about publishing, how did you make it happen? Is there any specific advice that you would give to people in those scenarios? Or just like a message of encouragement or inspiration?
I suppose first, it's possible. Second, I mean, I think it's worth saying I was working in a school. I wasn't a teacher. I was a young carers coordinator. I was doing admin for the inclusion department, and I was also a learning support assistant. Wow, I forgot for a second. But it meant that in terms of like marking and coursework and stuff, my summers were free. So what was helpful to me, because it is, it's costly, it can be costly doing work experience or an internship. At least now they are paid, and I'll come on to that in a second. But at least it meant that I could use my summer to do some work experience with this literary agency while I still had a salary coming in and really impress them. And then from that, I was set up with lots of really useful like publishing meetings. So from that, I met a bunch of people from Penguin, a bunch of people from Hachette, and actually a lot of those meetings also turned into other job offers. So if that's an option to you, there is that. But I do know how hard it can be when you do have a full-time job. Something that Orion runs is actually an internship for people who are switching careers. So it's deliberately targeting people who aren't fresh out of university. They might have been working for 20 years in a different business, or it might have been they've gone to raise a family and they want to come back. And that internship has been going quite well for us. We've had like several placements. That internship turned into jobs for several of our interns, which is great. I don't know if that answers the question fully enough, and if it doesn't, I will keep my eye on the chat, but hopefully that's a reassuring start.
No, I think it perfectly does. Also, lots of people asking specifically questions about how do you get that work experience in the first place? I think, a few people on this panel definitely did have that as part of their journey into publishing. Can you reveal anything about what you did in that application process for the work experience that helped you stand out, or just some considerations there?
This piece was slightly different because and again, transparently, I knew someone who knew someone. In the past, it's been sort of monitoring Twitter. So I'd done some, when I was much, much younger, some other work experience, but I was monitoring like social media sites and waiting for companies to post, or people who worked for companies to post, say, hey, we've got this coming up. A lot of the big publishers now have official work experience schemes. So not just for underrepresented voices, but across the board. So Hachette has their work experience scheme for underrepresented voices, and then a broader traineeship too. And similar with PRH. So it's just worth keeping an eye on the websites, their socials, because they will post about it. And like you say, Twitter/X it's still being used for the
Still
time
clinging
being.
on.
So it's worth keeping an eye on socials like that.
Anyone else have advice about the work experience scenario, making it onto those?
Yeah, I can probably mention something. So when it came to my one and I was applying, I thought I do want to hit the ground running. So that's why things like this, where you get to learn about different stages of publishing, just help me kind of outline my applications. So I remember one of the first questions for the creative access traineeship was, how would you present this new book to new customers who maybe haven't read it? And I literally did like a little list of like, here's what editorial should do, here's what marketing, publicity should do, and I just showed that I know what's going on, even though I kind of knew what was going on. I knew the departments and who would be involved, and it was just to show like I'm not, as important as a love of books is. If everybody's applying for publishing, you all love books, so it's what is it about you that is kind of standing out after that, because it's yeah, very relevant. They want somebody who will essentially know what they're talking about. Really, as simple as it sounds, it does help just having that idea of what you're getting into.
Brilliant. I've got a question also about networking and when it gets to that stage of things. But did anyone else have a contribution towards getting onto those work experience gigs? No. So we all know that in some industries it is about speaking to people, getting in front of people, building networks and connections that you can ask questions and learn more about the industry. Publishing is very much one of those sectors. I'm interested to know what various people on the panel's experience has been in networking scenarios. And also, I think the word networking can tend to put a lot of people off, and it's almost like a little bit scary and clinical. So maybe just advice on like how to get over that belief and what's on the other side. Does anyone have anything to offer about what they did when they were networking, or just some advice on how to start?
I could just say a quick thing in that, like, I was devastated when I realized networking actually works. It was like, oh, okay, I do have to talk to people. Okay, right, let's do this then. But obviously, having like working in retail, having a customer facing role, you know how to kind of present yourself and sort of set the mood and have conversations with people. And yeah, it's kind of drawing that fine line between, you know, just being conversational and then being like, so can I get something out of this? But obviously you don't lay it on too thick. But yeah, when I would go to like book signings and I get to meet people who are within the industry and like talk to them about it, and you know, just not really like, what do you do for a job? It's like, how has your day been? What's it been like organizing this event? Like I even I went to a signing for Jay Christoph, which was at St. Pancras, which is very surprising. And I got to talk to people who were just running the queue, and I was like, how's your day been? Where do you work? And yeah, after that, you could then essentially ask for like social media handles, and if for example they're a blogger or they do book reviews, you can be like, oh, where do you go for these? And you never know where people might be in like a year or two time, because I've got two of my colleagues at the Waterstones I used to work at are now in publishing. One of them is at Hachette, the other one's just got a job at Bloomsbury, and it's just like, oh well, I know where you are now in the future, so should any opportunities come up, it's like, well, who knows what's going to be, well, what's going to happen next year. So yeah, just keeping those relationships going as well. It's kind of the hard bit.
Absolutely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I was only going to say that I agree with that piece. I think just from an editorial perspective, I don't necessarily think networking is essential for getting into the role. I've done a lot of interviewing and hiring, and what's sort of been the reason we've taken someone on is, I don't think there's ever been someone who read it, like, you know, there's been a networking piece where we know someone who knows them, and we've hired them, although people have been submitted for the role, that's not who we've hired. But in editorial, I will say it is super important for building your career. It is about, like I said, maintaining relationships with agents, maintaining relationships with authors, finding, you know, new people to sort of champion your books and booksellers. It's quite a lot, and I think it's worth being transparent about that in traditional. I think in digital publishing and non-traditional publishing, you've got a bit more of an even playing field, because it's just about selling directly to the customer. And if you've got a great package, great copy, and a good marketing plan, it will work. But it has just been, you know, it's such a fundamental part of traditional publishing, and it's worth being transparent about that. Also, every single job I've gotten in publishing since I've started has been because someone has said, wow, she's done a really good job and has recommended me. So it does, people just talk so much. So it's just worth being aware of, and not to, you know, terrify anyone, but it's worth being transparent.
Yeah, and worth like working those muscles, as James said as well, like getting comfortable with setting tones, having some openers, that kind of thing.
It's not comfortable. I don't love it, but I forced myself to do it, and it's benefited me.
Good. Alana, Saida, Maria, love it, hate it. How do you feel about networking? Has it helped you?
I'm a terrible networker in terms of like, if someone was like network to get a job, I would not be getting the job. But I mean, yeah, in maintaining, like Leodora says, like maintaining relationships with people is really important. I mean, on the right side, a lot of the time it's just like my manager used to say, oh, you know, you have to just remember like how many children someone has, oh, if they were going to get married or something. And it's like ridiculous information like that. I mean, remembering that for like 100 people is very difficult. So yeah, networking is kind of difficult. So you kind of have to just, I guess, be personable more than anything, and make people remember you as well. Because I think they'll, even if you don't think that you might gain something from it, or you know, or you're not trying to gain something, whether you are or not, you might in the future, you know, you might end up with an email like a month later saying, oh, you know, I really enjoyed that conversation we had about blah blah blah, and then it could spin into something that you didn't expect. But yeah, I think just being someone people kind of like or remember or whatever is helpful sometimes.
Definitely. Right. Anyone else got any comments to make about networking? Because I'm going to dive into the Q&A portion. But does anyone have anything else to mention about networking?
Well, yeah, it was, Alana, do you want to say something?
I mean, you can go first for free.
There you go.
Oh, okay. I was just going to say that it obviously is a huge part of the industry, and it's something that we all do, but I just want to make it clear that like it's not the be all and end all. Like I didn't really do any networking before I got this job. I didn't have any contacts. Once you're in, it's very useful for like building up those like relationships, and if you're thinking about like maybe like transitioning into a different area of the company or like a different team or something, then it's really like essential to have. But in terms of getting in, don't stress yourself about like, oh, I have to meet as many people as possible and email as many people as possible. Like focus more on honing your own skills and like building up your CV and getting really confident, because like that's what's going to make you shine on the like application level rather than just knowing the right people. So yeah, don't stress too much about it having to be super important.
Brilliant. Maria?
Well, yeah, I was also thinking about networking, but from a different angle. And I guess sort of to answer the point about, you know, things are so London centric. What do we do if you're not in London? In the digital age, that's another way that you can network. Like, I know quite a few publicists actually who were bloggers previously, or you know, bookstagrammers, and that's kind of a way that you end up building a relationship with people in PR departments, in the comms team, in marketing. So, and that's kind of, you're building your influence. You show that you can do copywriting, like if you can write compelling like little book recommendations, it shows that you're passionate and you can write, and those are really important skills to have. Another one, you know, James has spoken about his book selling experience. Like publishers, who, we're all like so impressed with people who've worked in actual bookshops and know how these things work, because it's very complex. But you know, the way that these things are run, the way that books are chosen, how they're displayed, what deals are put out, how customers interact with things on the shop floor, and just having this overview of books across the publishing industry is really helpful as well, because I think we can all get a bit siloed in our, you know, if you're in Hachette or you're in Penguin or your different publishing houses, because there's so many books being pumped out. But it's always very handy to have that kind of overview, because we're always talking about books, book comps, i.e. comparison titles, trying to like if you've got a new book by a new author that no one knows about, we're always trying to like contextualize it by referring to other books. You know, it's like maybe slightly it's just a shorthand. It's not often like the best, most compelling way to describe a book, but it's just a really quick, easy way to do things. So I think there's just so much you can gain from that book selling experience. And then to go back to the online thing, loads of booksellers are tweeting or Instagramming about books. Publicists, we love that. We love to share that in our campaign updates to show, because we're always trying to get retailers excited about books. So anything to show that Waterstones are on board, or like there's this very passionate bookseller tweeting about it, because we can actually go back to like Waterstones head office and say, look, these guys are talking about it. Can you pay attention to this one? Because we're just constantly doing anything we can to stand out, where make our individual titles stand out, because there are thousands being pumped out every year.
That's it.
So yeah,
And
digital networking.
I couldn't agree more. And you also make a very vital point about Bookstagram or Book Talk. I think it was mentioned this year, like data was confirming that for the first time, social media is actually influencing book sales. Like it can be directly linked. So I think if you're in a starting position where you just don't have experience, you don't have a network at the moment, that's one easy place where you can gain insights into what's performing, what's trending, because a lot of these book talkers and bookstagrammers are actually talking about that specifically. And why not contribute to that conversation your own? A lot of our alumni do, so I definitely recommend that. Right, we're going to go on to some of the questions. We've just got a little short time left, so I think we'll probably only get through a few, but I think we managed to cover quite a lot just during the discussion. Some folks asking, when you do get that opportunity to get in front of someone, so say you have done a bit of that digital networking and you said, oh, can I grab you for a coffee? What next? Like, what are some really good questions, really impressive questions to maybe ask someone in rights or audio or editorial? Maybe they're a new contact of yours and you just kind of want to make sure that you're memorable, or you want to demonstrate that you really care about the industry. What are some really good sort of like openers or questions that you could possibly ask someone in those scenarios?
Yeah, I could go first. I had one or two interviews where I'd made it to the final round and then didn't get it. I remember one infamously, which was when I was asked to present a few books if I was presenting them to an international customer. And when I got, and they said, oh yeah, prepare like a speech and etc. And I was like, okay, got my sheet of paper there. And then they said, so do you have your PowerPoint ready? And I went, like what? And you know, that moment at the beginning of the interview, you're like, well, I haven't got this, but you have to push through anyway. And so I reached out to the interviewer afterwards and I said, could we, have a Zoom chat and just talk about what I could have done better? And during that time, I said, what things could I have improved on? What did you like about my application? Because you don't want to remove anything that was probably really good, that they really thought stood out. And yeah, just aspects of what they were looking for, because you most likely you have that experience ready to go. You just need to know how to apply it when you're speaking to an interviewer, or maybe in your CV. So I remember during my drafts of CVs, I drew my back so much that I just had a single page. I didn't want to just have it rambling on and on about all these different things I could do, because I want to bring it up in the interview. I want to have interesting things that they haven't heard about yet. And it was just like clean and concise. And then during the interview, I could be like, right, what do you want to know about me? I've got a lot to say.
That's brilliant. I think that's great. I think definitely you may not always get feedback if you don't necessarily make it through to interview stage, but ask anyway. And when you do make it through to interview stage, if you don't manage to get pushed to the next phase, asking for feedback, I think that's perfect. Anyone else I recommend?
I'll just say, go for it, James. Self-aware as well. Like, if you, when you kind of finish the interview, you might be like, okay, that's done. Time to wait for the response. But if you kind of do some self-reflection as well, think, okay, what do I think I did really well in that? What could I have improved? And then you can prepare for the next one. Because even if you've got a no, don't give up. Like, you only need to get one job. You can apply for as many as you want. You only need to get one. So yeah, just keep going and then just keep improving each time, because it will get easier and easier each time the more used to it you get.
Brilliant. And I've got two other questions. I'm going to do them back to back, and whoever wants to chime in, you can chime in. One is, how easy is it to move between different departments? That's quite an interesting one. And also, what advice would you give for people staying hopeful when you've been trying to get into the industry for a while? I think probably, you know, a lot of the panelists can identify with that. Does anyone want to take that? So it's how easy it's to navigate between departments and how do you stay hopeful?
I think quickly on the departments, it's easier to move horizontally than it is straight up. So if you're a marketing assistant, it'd be really hard to become like an assistant editor, but you could then become an editorial assistant. And it's much easier to, if you want to work in if you want to work in editorial, sometimes people will start in a different department and then move across as an assistant. Sometimes when you get more senior, it is easier to move up at the same time. So my boss used to work in publicity and then moved across into being publishing director, I think. So it's possible at more senior levels, but it's not super common. Is that answer?
Perfect. And does anyone have advice for staying hopeful as well?
I would say, I mean, you have to be, because there's so many people who want a publishing job that you kind of have to persevere. I mean, I think I graduated, well, I finished my MA in like the summer or whatever, you know, having to do your dissertation. I was applying for jobs that whole time, and I finally got a job in April the next year. So it's sort of like you can only just pad your CV in that time with things that might be relevant and things that might be useful. That could literally be anything, whether you manage to get an internship or a work experience placement, or it's sort of like, yeah, trying to work in a bookshop, or even volunteering at like a literary festival, or, you know, just like the world is your oyster. And I think anything that you do can be, you know, spun, like Maria said earlier, spun to be, you know, a transferable skill can be spun to be, you know, sound like it will help you in your future job, basically.
Perfect. Yeah, and I think a lot of people are in that scenario at the moment. I think that is really useful to reassure people about. We also have another question around the different offices that you have, specifically in Hachette. So would there be the option for there to be hybrid? Can you do remote? Can you do 100% remote, especially for individuals who identify as being disabled as well? So like, what are the kind of differences in ability to work, not just in the London office all the time?
The ongoing thing, I think, like I'm currently working in the London office, and I think most people work hybrid. It's like at least 3 days in the office, 2 days at home. But it's, yeah, all the regional offices are brilliant, and it just means that there is more opportunity for people outside of London to try and start applying for jobs. Some jobs do say like this is a position open in London and or Sheffield. I think it's at the moment it's improving in that a lot of people kind of get the job in London, then they're like, great, time to move out, rather than people in those areas who are joining from you know, Scotland, Midlands, etc. And in terms of flexibility, it is definitely something that it's discussed, I think, with your line managers, because I imagine sometimes it's helpful if you are in the office, and depending on the task, it's helpful that you are here. But then other times, if you really have an issue, it's like, well, I can get my job done, but what's the problem sometimes?
But I mean, increasingly on our own jobs board, there are lots of roles that are not just London. We're increasingly seeing Sheffield as a hub, and also hybrid is increasingly coming up in job descriptions. So I think there is that flexibility. And again, I don't know about Hachette specifically, but definitely when we've spoken to a number of publishers, as long as you're having those conversations up front with HR and at interview stage, and you're disclosing what your needs are or disclosing what your reasonable adjustments are, then there can definitely be considerations for sure.
One of our cohorts during the traineeship was actually based in the Scotland office, and it was brilliant just hearing her experience, like being there as well, and kind of getting used to working online, like through Teams for tasks we were doing together. And yeah, I think it's really important. It's something that is still developing and ongoing. So I'm really looking forward to, you know, what happens.
Awesome. Well, I mean, This hour has flown by. There are so many things that I would love to ask you all, but I think we covered lots of ground. We answered lots of the questions that people had pre-submitted and also live ones that we had on the call, and you all had such brilliant, valid contributions. We're just watch out, because we're definitely going to be using some of your areas of recommendation for sound bites and things, so just watch out for those. All that remains to say is thank you all so much to the panel for giving up your Thursday evening to provide advice to our community. And I also want to say to everyone who's dialed in, please look out on your emails. I know that a lot of you are looking directly for opportunities right now. So in the email that will follow up with you all tomorrow, there'll be a link to this recording so you can watch back and look at advice if you didn't catch it the first time round. We'll also be sharing some live roles with Hachette as well, so please keep a lookout for those and put yourself forward for anything that looks particularly attractive. And we'll also, most importantly, be sharing a feedback form. I'll share that feedback form with everyone in the chat right now. So please provide any comments and also recommendations about future webinars that you'd like to see from us and also potentially our Hachette partner. If you'd like us to go deep into a specific industry or a tool or any of the terms within publishing, please let us know. We'd love to hear from you, and also let us know within that feedback form if you found this session useful. Hopefully you did. If you're not already, make sure you're following us on social media, or make sure that you're registered with us. You can head to that registration link via our website, creativeaccess.org.uk. That means that you will never miss any opportunities for mentor matching, or any live roles or opportunities that come up each week. So just a big, huge thank you to everyone on our panel who joined us today, and thank you so much for everyone for dialing in. This was a great session.
Thank you so much for sharing and for all the great questions.
Thank you.
Great stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Have great evenings, everyone. Bye.